All right, welcome back to College Football Addiction. We finally made it to the national championship game. I feel like this season has gone forever, but I'm certainly not complaining about college football. We've got Joe DeLeon of the Ruffino and Joe Show on to chat with us about this. Joe, you were down there in Miami, and did Notre Dame's offense find something to build on in that fourth quarter?
I think that they did. And I think one thing that's not being discussed, that's actually being pushed as a negative for this Notre Dame team, there was some reshuffling that happened with this Notre Dame offensive line. Charles Jagasaw, who was supposed to be the starting left tackle at the beginning of the year and went down with a pec injury, had to step in at, I believe, what was right guard because of Rocco Spindler going down. Anthony Knapp, the starting left tackle, who was a true freshman this year and played good, had some ups and downs, he went out in this game. I think it's one of the few times that you can look at an offense that had to throw in a a new player into the mix, and their offensive line actually got better. They weren't getting any push in the interior, but as soon as Jagasaw comes in, suddenly they're able to get that necessary push off the ball to create some of those rushing lanes, especially like what we saw on that scoring drive to start the third quarter. I think that there is a recipe here, and they're not putting out the exact starting offensive lineup. Knowing that Anthony Knapp is out, it feels like Jagasaw is going to be starting somewhere. And I think that that should be a huge positive that Notre Dame fans should be looking at, knowing that there was this sudden injection of juice into their run game.
It felt like in the first half for so much of it. Now, both teams were kind of feeling each other out, but Penn State had scored a little bit. It felt like Notre Dame just couldn't get anything going offensively. And then obviously they had a couple of injuries on the offensive line. They had, Riley Leonard goes down. And to me, the drive with your backup coming in and just getting you something felt so huge. And I don't know that I would have predicted. We didn't know what was going to happen with Leonard. I mean, I had buddies at the game that were texting me like, "Hey, dude, like, is he seeing straight or like what's the broadcast?"
I said
saying?
the same thing. It looked like he stood up like he was drunk. I was like, "Oh, he's done."
His eyes were like different zip codes. One was looking at Naples and one was looking at Fort Myers. So, but yeah, like it felt like it let them relax a little bit. Like, okay, if we can move the ball with him, but did they do something differently in the second half, or do you really? I mean, I know you talked a lot about Jagasaw there, but like, was it really just him them able to get the push, or did Riley Leonard maybe settle down some, or like what all did he maybe get some sense knocked into him, or what happened there?
I think that was part of it. Definitely didn't settle down some because we saw him throw an even more brutal interception than the first one. But I think that one of the biggest differences that helped get Jeremiah Love going, that was, first of all, the intent. It was, how do we get him touches, even though he's a little banged up, how do we get him touches? Because we know that he is the catalyst for our offense starting to regain energy, because they couldn't really connect and have consistency throwing the ball. And a lot of what they did on that opening drive was delayed handoffs, read option, putting the defense in just a decision-making point and a delay that then opened up lanes for Jeremiah Love. For some reason, and they've done that to success a lot this year, for some reason, it felt like that they got away from that in the first half. And then in the second half, they restarted going with that approach. That to me is going to be really big and important for this Ohio State game, that they find not only ways for Jeremiah Love to get the ball, but uncontested ways to get the ball in order to pick up a head of steam and to gain 5-6 yards every couple of carries.
Yeah, I thought the halftime adjustments were so crucial. And you just look at the two halves. Penn State scores 10 and 14, so they scored twice each half. Notre Dame scored 3 on their last drive of the half, and then 24 in the second half. Maybe 3 of that aided by the interception by Drew. But it was obviously the fourth quarter explosion was big for both teams, but just the way that they adjusted in the second half was big. Yeah. And they'll have to do that again on Monday. Like there's no doubt that there will be some kind of adversity in this game, playing Ohio State as a 2-score dog. Like there will be that again. I want to ask about what Texas did defensively, but I'll stay on the offensive side of the ball, starting to look at Ohio State too. I thought Texas played a little bit better than scoring just 14 points. They had 341 yards of offense. Obviously, they were a yard or two away from tying the thing up. They had an early fourth down stop. I thought Sark did a pretty good job of scheming things up, and really as well as he could, against a really good Ohio State defense. Do you think there are things that Texas did offensively that Notre Dame can try to mimic? I know their weapons are different. I know that it's a different scheme and style, but there's so much talk about, and we'll get to it, what Notre Dame can do defensively to mimic what Texas did. But often, I mean, you got to score points too, right? You're probably not going to win this thing 14-10. What can they do offensively against a really good Ohio State defense?
I think that, and this needs to be recognized as being realistic. I think a lot of people, again, just in prediction of this game, assume that Ohio State's going to dog walk them and it's going to be over. Texas put on film on both sides of the ball the formula to beat Ohio State. Quinn Ewers is what got in the way in the really just bad fumble. We all were holding our breath and just waiting for that mistake to come through. But I look at the way that for them in the second half, the way that they were able to open up their offense and to reinvigorate their receivers is that they were throwing the ball to Jaden Blue and Trey Wisner in space. They're running wheel routes, they're running swing routes. Notre Dame also did this against Penn State. One of the biggest splash passing plays was a wheel route that was run by Aeneas Williams, the third running back for Notre Dame. Young guy, doesn't get enough love as he should be getting. That play is replicable. I think that there is going to be an attention to detail by Ohio State to load up the box and to say, just like that they did against Texas, completely removing the interior run game, they're going to say, you better fight for these yards, and Riley Leonard better beat us with his arm. Those opportunities one-on-one with Aeneas Williams or Jeremiah Love or Jadarian Price with a linebacker is going to be how they win and how they're going to orchestrate moving the ball down the field.
I thought it was the first of all, I don't know. Well, I do know where you were sitting, but I don't know where it happened in relation to the play. But when Greathouse went up and kind of high pointed that ball on that third and long and caught it, I immediately thought Jeff Samardzija, which I know that's a throwback, and I know that just the way that he looked high pointing that and catching it, and then the move in the open field. On the long touchdown, I was like, dude, I'm right. That's him. That is Jeff. You know, like I know that's a throwback for 20 years back, but I was like, he just took over his body and did some ridiculous things. And so it almost feels like to me, you know, I don't know if you have an X factor. I don't know if, you know, who you would maybe think if it could be him again or someone else, but it almost feels like to me to overcome a really good Ohio State defense and score enough points to keep up their offense, they will need kind of a breakout performance from somebody that's maybe unexpected. Like you would expect Love to get his, and you would expect Leonard's legs to be a factor if Notre Dame's going to win this. But you need somebody else to step up in this situation. Do you have a prediction for who that could be?
Well, it's going to be Greathouse or it's going to be Jordan Faison, the lacrosse player who I've brought up here before. Faison in the first game against Indiana was that guy. And then this past game, it was Greathouse. Both of them produced huge chunk plays, but also had a couple of dink and dunk passes that they caught and they were able to generate some yards off of. Similar play styles. Greathouse, I think, is a little bit more of an explosive athlete, but either one of them, if they can get going, it is going to be huge for Notre Dame's success because to that point, there's going to be a lot of one-on-one situations for these receivers. They need to capitalize on any openings that they're given. Otherwise, it could be just really tough sledding for this Notre Dame offense.
So looking at the other side of the ball now, defensively, you know, even Marcus Freeman has talked about trying to give more zone looks or trying to replicate a little bit of what Texas did. I thought that, you know, Texas's style and their play, like I don't want to take anything away from the actual play on the field, though I thought Ohio State kind of shot themselves in the foot some. Texas's style and just the way they played defensively certainly limited and seemed to frustrate, you know, Will Howard and that offense, and certainly shut down Jeremiah Smith better than anybody would have ever predicted. If you'd have given me a line of 3.5, I would have taken the over on his yardage. I kind of thought about one of those prize picks things where they give you a free pick and they're like Jeremiah Smith 5 yards and you're like $5 million, you know, and then you lose the bet.
Right.
I would still take the over of 3.5 on his yardage on Monday night. But how effective can a primarily man team be at going away from what they do in spots? And would you prefer that? Like you try something kind of newish, or do you just kind of say like, hey, these are my guys. Like, let's line them up and we'll take my guys against your guys? Or how do you, I mean, that's to me, that's the biggest game within the game is how they play it defensively.
Right. I think it would be extremely very risky to have that approach for Al Golden, just to go out there and say, yeah, you know what, our guys have been great in man coverage. They're going to be fine against Jeremiah Smith. That's how you get cooked. We've got freshman on freshman here, likely with, if it's Christian Gray guarding him, who's a redshirt guy, and then you've got Leonard Moore, who's a true freshman. It's not like we're sticking Benjamin Morrison out there to cover Jeremiah Smith, who did great against Marvin Harrison Jr. last year. But if we remember from that game, yes, Marvin Harrison Jr. got a little bit banged up, and he had ankle issues in that game where Notre Dame played Ohio State really closely. but they also did a really good job of understanding where he was on the field and to limit those opportunities, not just with man-on-man coverage with Benjamin Morrison. So I think that Golden, knowing how they played against this team last year, is going to be very direct in trying to give him a little bit of extra attention. Again, it's on film. It is on film that when Texas was being very intentional about having an extra man within striking distance of Jeremiah Smith, it led to that interception that Will Howard threw. Will Howard felt like it was at a point in the game to start the second half was in the spot where maybe he was told by Chip Kelly or Ryan Day, hey, we got to get him going. Just force the ball to him. That is something that Ohio State fans tried to tell me after the Penn State game, that was the whole philosophy of just throw the ball in these contested spots. Somebody's going to come down with it. Doesn't make any sense to me because against a team like Texas and a team with safeties as good as Texas, they're going to pick that ball off. And I think the same thing applies here for Notre Dame, that Xavier Watts, Adon Schuler, Christian Gray, Leonard Moore, if they're in a doubled spot and there is a ball in the air that's not really easily catchable by Jeremiah Smith, they need to come away with those turnovers. But I think that the crucial part about this is have a roaming safety that is in range to make a play on the football.
Yeah, you talked a little bit about the, putting pressure on Will Howard and kind of getting after him. Notre Dame had 1 sack against Penn State. Would you think that number has to increase? Would you think the pressure on him has to increase? Now, they get the ball out quickly, and they do have some, I wouldn't even call them safety valves, but if the Smith connection's not working, they've got enough to be fine throwing the ball to other targets. How aggressive do you expect the Notre Dame front to be, and how effective do you think they'll be against an Ohio State offensive line that's been up and down, but certainly found something in here in the playoffs?
Yeah, they've been up and down, and I think they came back down to reality against Texas, which Texas's front is one of the best in the country. It is loaded with talent. Notre Dame's isn't exactly fully there with all the injuries that they've suffered on their defensive line, but I think that's a unit that needs to get more pressures and needs to get more tackles for loss. That was my major negative when I did my post-game stream on Bleacher Report that I brought up was, hey, this can't happen against Ohio State. This can't happen against Texas, depending. That was before the outcome of the game. Them having, I think they only had 2 tackles for loss and the 1 sack. They need to be able to generate pressures, and they need to be able to do so against light boxes because the emphasis is going to be on pass defense and how their secondary plays. They're not going to be able to be super ultra aggressive on every single snap. Otherwise, they're going to get burned.
Leonard feels like he needs to play cleaner. You certainly don't see a situation where he throws a couple of picks and they beat Ohio State. Now, I would have probably told you the same thing going to the Penn State game too. So, who knows what my analysis on that is worth. But do you look at last week as like hey, we survived that Riley Leonard multiple turnover game and now he will play cleaner. They'll call it a little bit differently. He won't force things, or does his play worry you, or just thoughts around how he will play on Monday night?
I think naturally Notre Dame fans and those covering the team should be a little nervous after the way they played against Penn State because this Ohio State defense is a lot better. Not significantly better, but they really don't have any weakness. They don't really have like a key weakness that is easily attackable for Notre Dame. There are scheme approaches that they can go after, like we talked about at the beginning of this video. But if he's not on just like on point with his carefulness with the football, it is going to kill Notre Dame. We saw Quinn Ewers have one of his best decision-making games for 3 quarters. Didn't turn the ball over. He had 1 almost fumble, but didn't turn the ball over, and he was doing great. That was what it took. That was what it took for that game to be close and to come down to a final drive, and it all shifted and changed as soon as that fumble happened. So for this case, Riley Leonard's got to protect the football. He has to be aware of pressure and where it's coming from. He needs to continue, and what helps his game so far during this playoff run, he needs to continue to assess pressure and know when to leave the pocket. That has been his biggest asset, and it is going to be Notre Dame's biggest supporting point in their offense against Ohio State.
So this opened up at like 9.5. It's actually down a little bit from there, and maybe people think this could be a little bit closer than it originally opened up at. I know that it's I know that it's hard to project and take feelings out of things, but I don't care if you put feelings into this or not. So you got one game left. If people don't like your pick, they don't like your pick. Can they pull the upset?
I think the upset's certainly possible. I definitely, if I'm a betting man, by the way, I'm taking Notre Dame to cover. Notre Dame has shown an ability that when they're facing adversity, they've bounced back. The Penn State game is a perfect example of that. But I feel like it's really astounding to me that people are framing this like it is a no shot opportunity. Notre Dame is going to get their asses kicked. They've lucked their way all the way through here. Notre Dame has a really good football team. Both teams have injuries. Both teams have injuries at key positions. Both teams have really good depth at certain positions. This matchup is closer than people realize, especially with the sloppiness that Ohio State showed on film. Is Ohio State the most talented roster in college football? Absolutely. But this isn't 2012, like some people are trying to make this out to be, when Notre Dame played an Alabama team that was loaded front to back with insanely gifted players that would go on to have amazing NFL careers. This Ohio State team is good, but in the modern version of college football, that gap has completely shrunk. If Ohio State is so much better than Notre Dame, that to me does not feel like a situation where Notre Dame is this plucky underdog that's basically a G5 team that's going to get their asses kicked. I think that if Notre Dame plays strong, just good fundamental football like they've done all throughout this year, and they protect the ball, they force at least a turnover, that is enough for them to win this ball game.
Joe, where can people follow you? Where can they get more of your work?
You can catch me on Twitter at Joe DeLeon. On Bleacher Report, I'm going to be live after the game, so check me out on Bleacher Report, breaking down the Notre Dame, hopefully, victory, and Ruffino and Joe show, where I argue with my co-host, Blake Ruffino. We're on YouTube, and we're live every Sunday, Monday, and Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Appreciate it, as always, TJ.
Thanks, buddy. If you enjoyed this content, if you liked it, if you hated it, if it made you feel any kind of way, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. We certainly do appreciate all of the support as we continue to grow here on College Football Addiction. We will talk to you guys soon.